Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about 3 league starters that I made during the last league, which 2 of them are still top-notch, which is going to be Poisonous Concoction and Explosive Trap. Whereas with Wintertide Brand, I feel like it has some issues with a lot of bossing probably going on next league. We'll talk about that at the end, but Poisonous Concoction and Explosive Trap I can both vouch for. Now, if you haven't seen my dedicated videos about them, I will link them down in the description so you can look at them. I can't make a new build guide every league for every single build, right? I can just do these updates and tell you what happened in patch, for example, 3.17 that maybe made it better, made it worse, right? So you kind of have an approximation and you don't watch an old video and you're like, I don't know if this still works, right? So first up, I want to talk about Poisonous Concoction. Now, Poisonous Concoction was the build that I actually league started last league. If you remember this video, it will be linked down below. But basically, it kind of popped off. A lot of people were talking about it, but they were kind of scared because new skill scary, which is true, right? But the skill turned out way better than I actually thought. So just in terms of leveling experience, I've never had anything as easy. It kind of felt like having leveling gear on at league start, which I still don't get how GG didn't nerf it in 3.17. And that's what I want to talk about here first, because they did not touch Poisonous Concoction. A few other things happened that we have to talk about, but overall, this skill is still extremely strong. Now, I wrote down some important points for Poisonous Concoction. Number 1, if you are a beginner, you definitely want to play this build. I talked about Explosive Arrow Ballista. I think it's extremely strong, but if you're only looking to get through the acts, to dip a little bit into maps, this is probably the best build out there. It was even so when Toxic Rain was not nerfed, but now Toxic Rain is nerfed. So this is the clear number 1 for an easy gameplay experience. So when a new player comes into my stream and he asks about EA Ballista, I always say, go Poisonous Concoction, you're gonna love it, right? You want to get a little bit of experience and know how attacks work, right? How accuracy works, how the whole mechanics work of an explosive arrow to actually understand how to scale it. But this one, you do not have a weapon, right? You don't have to scale anything. This build is extremely forgivable, and that is what you're looking for as a beginner. Now, something that this build definitely doesn't have is that much boss damage, right? It's very comfy, it's very defensive. You can basically face tank most things in the game once you have like the Divine Flesh setup. But something I will say is that the single target damage can get a little rough, right? We're looking at 5 mil DPS here, but that's my old POB, right? That still has the +2, which is going to be hard to get now that Scourge isn't here anymore. The rest is pretty much whatever. You need some cluster jewels to do real damage. I talk about this in the video extensively. I don't have to repeat it, right? But basically, what I'm saying is that from what it looks like, Archnemesis is kind of like kill a big rare, right? The new pinnacle bosses are there to be killed. It's all single target, right? So it might take you a little bit longer, but then again, you're so tanky that it's probably going to be fine. You're just going to have to stand there for a little bit longer. I also go over ways on how to scale Poisonous Concoction in the video later. I have its own section, so definitely mind that. But if you're a beginner and you're not really looking to kill pinnacle bosses like day 1 or something, and just have a cozy first build experience, this is definitely still it. Now, the last kind of nerf that basically every Chaos build got was this Chaos Resistance aura on rares that they introduced. So basically, if you look at this here, we have, where is it? Added a new magic and rare modifiers for chaos resistance for all monsters. So I don't know how frequent this is going to be. I guess it's going to be in the mod pool. I don't know if it's weighted or anything. It's not really a Poisonous Concoction nerf per se. It's a nerf, I guess, to every single chaos build out there. I don't know how big it's going to be. I don't know how the numbers are going to be. I don't know if it's even that consequential, if you're even going to feel it, right? Just wanted to point this out. So it could be a little bit more important to actually get your Despair early, right? To reduce elemental resistances, to get your helmet with -9 chaos rest to nearby enemies early, right? Reduce enemy resistances a little bit more efficient. But overall, I got to give this build a still great out of 10. If you're looking for a awesome leveling experience, followed up by a good early mapping experience, followed up by red maps where you actually have to invest into your character, this build definitely does fall off. Because if you think about it, it doesn't have a weapon to upgrade, right? Which is huge at the start because you don't want to upgrade anything. But later, this kind of becomes a crutch of the build. So you have to invest into a lot of small upgrades, right? Into cluster jewels. I go over it over this in the video in detail, but I still gotta give this a still grade, especially if you're a new player. This is probably your best bet. So yeah, if you're interested, check it out. Let's get to the next build. All right, next up, let's talk about Explosive Trap. This is basically me league start testing this build. I don't have any auras on, so I'm actually doing less damage and I'm less defensive than I usually am. I love this build. Actually, Seismic Trap wasn't hit too much, right? So you could still go Seismic Trap. I don't actually know how it's going to pan out. I said in the video that if Seismic Trap gets nerfed too much, this is probably the next in line to be extremely good. And with how a lot of the, like, for example, the trap support got nerfed, right? This is definitely the next best contender. I just gotta say it. We actually don't even go for much offense in this, as I show right now. I actually go for quite a bit of defense. So this is a trap build that is actually feel good. Now for the new pinnacle bosses, if you wanted to, you can definitely make this a lot more squishy and make it like a one-shot machine. So number one, Explosive Trap actually got buffed. So as you can see here, the base damage got increased, as well as the damage effectiveness. So overall, what this means is that just on its own, Explosive Trap got buffed, but it's not that easy, right? If you look at Cluster Trap, this one is actually nerfed. So we're using both in the last video, which is kind of weird, right? You might think. So it's not really that much of a buff, right? Because this one got nerfed significantly. If you put these both together, it does around about the same damage as it did Dispatch. And that is true if it wasn't for Swift Assembly that you can still use. So what Cluster Trap, Multiple Trap, and Swift Assembly support basically are supports that makes it easier for you to throw your traps, right? So usually you would think, well, Cluster Traps is the best, but now that it gives like 60% less damage or something, I mean, that's just out of this world. I don't think it's worth it anymore to go for it over Swift Assembly. Swift Assembly actually doesn't have a less damage multiplier. It just gives you straight up chance to throw more traps, which isn't as consistent, right? And it's not that, like, it's not a perfect placement and all of that. But since the damage got nerfed, there's nothing here that like reduces your damage, right? So what you should do probably is just scale more trap throwing speed and go Swift Assembly. Overall, it's probably going to come out to the same. I don't know if this is complete. I haven't tested this in game, but it should be in theory. So worst comes to worst and Swift Assembly doesn't work out for some reason. I don't know why. And you just go still, right? You still go Explosive Trap and Cluster Traps and your damage will basically be the same, right? Because this one gets kind of offset by this one. Sure, the damage was already really, really good, so I don't mind. But it's basically all upside because now if you can make Swift Assembly work, you're actually doing 45% more damage. So look out for that. Now, next up, I want to correct something that I said in the last video, which is you want to scale a lot of AoE. I was not aware that this skill actually works the other way around, like, for example, Firestorm does, right? Where if you decrease its AoE, you actually do more single target damage. So somebody on Reddit pointed this out to me. He was on my stream. I hope you're the same person. I'm just going to credit Hoplarkus Psitakis, I guess. Thank you for this very interesting post and this spreadsheet with certain AoE breakpoints. So the TLDR of the spreadsheet, which I'm going to link down below, is basically that you want to actually go concentrated effect on bosses. And the thing about this is we took some of these AoE clusters, right? 1, 2. I would actually just cut them after now knowing that. And you just fill out jewels, right? And you go for crit multi, life, whatever you can. You can also take Will of Blades, for example. So this would be like an example tree. I can actually link the updated version down below. So overall, this build will definitely get a still good out of 10. If Cluster Traps is still the best way to play it, nothing changes about the damage. If you make Swift Assembly work, it is 45% more damage, which is insane, right? On a skill that already deals so much damage, you have a lot of overlapping explosions. And like now that we know this, right? I didn't do that in my last video. I actually had bad single target, apparently, right? And that was not that bad. So it can only go up from here. Concentrated effect, created effect for bossing is definitely a #1 choice. As for like general clear or leveling, I've had no issues whatsoever. It was very smooth. Now it's obviously not a poisonous concoction in that sense, right? It's nowhere near that, but as for endgame bossing, this is way better than Poisonous Concoction. So if you want to kill pinnacle bosses, this might be worth looking into. As for Wintertide Brand and the whole Vortex setup, I think this is very, very nice for leveling. It's a very solid build overall. But while it is solid, I have a fear that for the new bosses, it might not have enough single damage on low gear. Now, that being said, if you're a good player, if you have played this for if you have played the game for a long time, you'll still know how to scale this. You'll still kill everything in the game. It's not going to be a problem, but you're probably going to need a shafts, and you're going to have to go low life. On this version that I did right here, I had to go like kind of budget, right? I think it was around about 3x. So I didn't have any of those. I basically just had life. I pressed my life flask, right? Like you would at Leaguestart. And for that kind of playstyle, the new pinnacle bosses might be a little bit too rough. All right, something I want to correct real quick from my last video. I already put this in the description and the POB is updated, but I forgot that controlled destruction exists, I guess. So I didn't put in, like I put in Swift Affliction, which is just straight up worse, right? Just to point that out. Now, the problem I have with my version of Wintertide Brand, which is the budget version, right? For new players, right? It doesn't have enough damage, defenses, or recovery, right? And the thing about Wintertide and Cold Dots in general is their damage is just a little mediocre right now. They have a lot of tools for defenses, right? They don't need much. Like, a good thing is they don't need much damage nodes, right? Sure, but in the new, like the way I see the new league is we're gonna have to face a lot of single target, and this build just does not hold up to the standards. Now, that being said, I am like no fortune teller. I don't know if that's actually true. For Conquerors, it was enough. So for Conquerors, it was like exactly enough. Basically, for Cyrus, it was exactly enough. But I have a feeling like with Pinnacle bosses, they put it on the same stage as Maven. And if I think about fighting Maven on this, like that's a whole different deal, right? Now, to be fair, we have extremely budget gear. And if you build this into like low life with the shafts, right? No question, you can probably do anything you want in the game, but then I would probably tell you to go for a different build than mine, right? There's a lot of good content creators out there that put this build a little bit further, right? That go into like the 10 to 100x even territory. Now, what this character does do well, though, is get another character to level 80, for example. Let's say you're a witch, right? You're a minion boy, and your minions don't really scale that well early, right? It's really bad for League Start, and you're like, what am I gonna do with my witch until I'm at that point? And you say, okay, I go for Cold Dot. So you go for Vortex, you go for Wintertide Brand, you basically follow everything I said in the video. You can go to level 80, no problem, right? No damage fall off whatsoever. So you're never gonna be in red maps. When you're in red maps, you're gonna have already your minion set up or whatever you wanna do. Maybe you have a weird Ignite build that doesn't get better until you get like Black Flame, and you need the unique first, right? So you can definitely do this first. So that, I would say, is something that Wintertide Brand excels at. But with that comes my rating, and that is I cannot recommend it unless you're experienced out of 10. Number one, in order to pull stuff off like respecking into another character, you have to know what you're doing, right? You have to save, you have to make a tree that basically makes it so you don't have to respec too much because you don't have infinite regret orbs, right? You have to know when to respec. You have to exactly prepare everything. So if you're a new player, I would say I cannot recommend this to you. If you're experienced enough, you can clear pinnacle bosses with most skills, right? But I would say that Cold Dot does fall into that category. If you're good at the game and you just like how Wintertide Brand looks, you can use it. I just personally on this YouTube channel cannot recommend it because there's a lot of new players, right, looking for a League starter. So what does this come out to in conclusion? Just real quick to reiterate, Poisonous Concoction has an insane level 1 to 80. You will absolutely love it. It can be extremely tanky while still dishing out a lot of damage because you don't need that many damage nodes because it has so much inherent damage. It does have a fall off at late game bosses though, because it needs some gear. With Explosive Trap, we have a decent level 1 to 80, nothing to write home about, but you'll be fine. Insane single target damage. It is a great bosser, so once you get into that bossing range, you're going to love this. You can pre-fire your traps. It's just going to get obliterated, right? And the biggest thing about Explosive Trap that I actually really appreciated is it didn't really feel like it ever had a damage fall off, which is weird for League starters, right? That's some Seismic Trap stuff, right? So once again, if Seismic Trap, if the nerf wasn't enough to keep Seismic Trap in check, it's probably still the best choice for trappers, but Explosive Trap would be a close second. Or if Seismic Trap turns out the EOE nerf is kind of bad, Explosive Trap should be your next choice. Now, Wintertide Brand has a great level 1 to 80. Absolutely solid. You won't have any problems. It has a hard fall off at endgame bosses. The damage is just too low without going Energy Shield, Chevron's Wrappings, stuff like that. But I will say it is a superb choice if you want to level a witch. As I said, for example, if you're a minion build, right, and you want to respec later, this is a superb choice. Overall, this is the only build that I would not recommend at League Start for a new player. But that's it for the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, subscribe. As always, huge shout out to my Twitch subscribers and my Patreons. I couldn't do videos like this without you. Thank you so much for the support. But yeah, overall, these two builds still extremely solid. Wintertide Brand, maybe not so much. Probably wouldn't recommend it, right? Unless you really want to see the Wintertide Brand MDX, which is beautiful, by the way. But yeah, hope this could give you a little bit of insight, maybe push you into one direction in what you want to play. But yeah, with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.